All right. I'm happy that this interview takes place. I'm Nati. I'm from GVFX ARMY and have been an admin since a year, I think. I've been in ARMY a little bit more than a year, I guess now. And yeah, I'm working as a freelance motion designer right now, and I'm living in Germany.
Ooh, cool. All right. I'm JT from the BTS ARMY Job Board. I've been there since it started last year. So we're about to turn 1 year old this coming October. Yeah. And then I've been in the Army since 2019, Boy with Love era. So I haven't been here long, but I've been very immersed, very busy with my Army life.
So my name is Stoll, and I am a graphic designer, creative director, art director, illustrator, artsy fartsy, does a little bit of everything kind of person. I'm from Buffalo, New York, and a few years ago I moved to New York City, so that's where I live. And I went to college for graphic design and illustration. I absolutely have always loved to draw since I was little, and when I was in high school my mom encouraged me to look into graphic design as a career to maybe find a way to use drawing and illustration, but also the fact that there's lots of different things that you can do within graphic design and different kinds of people you could work for, and as sort of a way to cull all these interests that I have together. So I went to a college in Buffalo, New York called Damon College, and that was a cool experience. I had a really great internship and a really horrible internship, and both of them taught me a lot. It was actually really valuable, the good and the bad. And I don't know how, I think, whenever you talk to designers, a lot of times they will be like, and then I landed this amazing job and my life was great. But my journey has a lot of twists and turns, and I'm sure we could talk more about that, but sort of as an introduction in a nutshell, there was a lot of chaos and just I don't know what's going to happen in life, and it was hard to find a job that resonated and all this kind of stuff. But my story is kind of a story of how a lot of little things added up and coalesced. And now that I have a little bit of time, I can look back and be like, oh, when I was having a rough experience, that was actually teaching me something. That led me to a cool experience, which led me to another and another. And so over the course of a few years, I worked a series of really cool gigs with my mentor, which led me to a job doing design for merchandise with Lucasfilm, which then after that, people at Sony Music saw something that I did, which had a little bit of accolades and whatnot, and they invited me to interview with them. And that was a really scary process. I was like, oh, there's no way I'll ever get this job. But I got the job. And so about 6 years ago, I started working at Sony Music in this pool of art directors that work across all the labels. And then quarantine hit, and Sony completely restructured. So I sort of almost lost my job, but then transitioned to a new job, and basically Columbia Records, because of a lot of the work that I had done for BTS, knew about me and sort of basically asked me to come on and be with just Columbia Records. So that's where I'm at right now. I am a senior art director at Columbia Records.
Wow, I love it. I can foresee that we will talk about a lot of things today. The purpose of this interview is to give armies an idea about the entire journey of being a creative. I mean, a while ago you said that you did a lot of other gigs that accumulated, and some of the experiences you thought were not related or probably not useful or not good for you, but at the end of the day teaches you so many lessons that you could use and apply to where you are right now. All right, so Annie, what do you do? Let's just talk about your work life later. But for now, let's know more about who Annie Stoll is. So what do you do? What do you do on the weekends, like outside of work? What do you do for fun?
So I feel like pre-pandemic, I love to travel and hang out with my cat and my friends
You
and,
have a cat.
just see art. Yeah, I do. And hopefully she's eating her food right now and not bugging us. But yeah, and I always love to see new art. I super relate to the whole like namjuning, like
Yeah.
let's just go out and see nature and things like that. And then I think when pandemic hit, like my world became sort of very small, but also very big because, I got to like meet amazing people from online too.
Yeah.
But I think in the pandemic, my free time would be like, I just like to go out into like nature. I don't live so far from Central Park, so I love to like look at birds.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of become a hobby of mine. Yeah, and I love to draw like all the time, just always trying to experimenting. I like to draw on my iPad and sketchbooks.
Hmm.
Um,
Do you still draw when you go out?
yeah, I love to like draw from life. I think it's like a good, exercise and yeah, just like sit on a park bench and draw some trees.
Aw,
It's really good.
it's very healing. Yeah.
It is. I would say I think that sometimes there's this pressure as like designer or artist that like you have to like monetize your hobbies or whatever your hobbies are have to like inform what you're doing. And like sometimes it's good as an artist to just like give yourself time to see the world and not have that pressure. And I think maybe if you had asked me that a few years ago, I would have been like, I'm doing all these things to my brand and all this kind of stuff. But I think that I'm in a place now where I would say I think it's a little healthy to like go look at birds sometimes. You know what I mean? You actually never know like when that kind of stuff will come back to you. Like I was reading a lot about like language of flowers stuff, and I recently had a client who wanted to work with a cover that had like flowers and symbolism and meaning. And so like yeah, it did kind of come back, but not purposefully. So yeah, hobbies are fun. If you have any new ones to suggest me, tell me.
Sure. Okay, how you mentioned that you go around Central Park. Do you find a lot of inspiration in nature since you like going around, trees and the forest, like the park?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of like a reflection of like life and art and all that kind of stuff because like you know, even though this park is only so big, there's so many different birds that migrate throughout the season. There's so many different like plants that change. And the one nice thing about quarantine is like, maybe before I would go and I'd be like, oh, I saw some flowers, that was cool. But then being able to actually like see the seasons change, like I just find that super inspirational, or that you can like look up at the sky and see these like really beautiful clouds. I think the first year of quarantine this summer, there was a lot of like rainbows that kept happening because of like the time of the sun showers. And then this year we had like a lot of like really cool like electrical storms. So, from my window, I could like, watch the thunder roll in and like the lightning. And I don't know, I think that it's cool to like think about, the earth. And, it also encourages you to like, care more about it too. And, it's definitely inspirational. It's inspirational in lots of different ways. It's not always quantifiable, but sometimes just being able to like let your mind wander gives you a recharge too.
Yeah. Aside from nature, what else do you see outside that, you usually draw inspiration from?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons I really like New York as a city, and what I really liked when I would travel, is that like there's so much different art and there's so many cool people and different kinds of people that bring so many different flavors. And I love seeing that. Like I love walking on the street and seeing cool graffiti, and I love, walking by some place and seeing, art hanging. Like that's so inspiring. And like sometimes it's challenging too. Like, like there'll be, really important things that'll happen in our city, like Black Lives Matter, and like like things that are constantly happening, dialogues that are ever going on in our city. And I think that's just so inspirational and cool and like important to be a part of.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned a while ago that you visited some museums. Have you visited any lately?
Yeah.
Are you allowed to go out? I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, we can. Yeah, I'm vaccinated, so but I'm still like super, super careful. Um, but this past weekend, my best friend and I, who's actually sitting off camera, she's a huge army. So we actually went to the New York Botanical Gardens. Yeah, and there was a really beautiful Kusiyama exhibit with like her huge pumpkins and flowers, and it was like integrated into nature. So it was really, really cool to see that, and it was like, you know, it was outside too, so you know, we just had this like beautiful nature, really cool art. It was a blast.
And you get to go outside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the best of all our worlds.
Okay, so how do you keep yourself updated? I mean, you find inspiration in nature, you go out, you visit museums, and you walk around New York City, wherein you see a lot of, like the clash of a lot of cultures, and it's like a melting pot of a lot of cultures, you know. Okay, so what else? Like, where do you get your latest information?
I feel like online, obviously, it's kind of like where, hey, we met, and you know, where a lot of things take place. So I like Twitter and Instagram a lot. You know, like I will actually follow like a bazillion different people and kinds of accounts and everything. So my scroll is a little bit like whatever I happen to see, I happen to see. It's a little bit of like by chance, but I love to sort of like follow other artists and like keep up with news that way. And I have like way too many bookmarks of places to like look at things. If you're talking about like graphic design and stuff, I subscribe to a lot of like typography newsletters.
Ah, yeah.
So
That keeps
like I really
evolving.
enjoy that. Yeah, totally. And I also keep a bunch of different folders on Instagram for like sort of like work / enjoyment purposes. So I have like a folder for like cool typography or like cool photographers or like, you know, really beautiful illustration. And so I can like go back and refer to, and you know, whatever I find during my day that's cool, I'll save it. And sometimes I go back to refer those for work stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, you know, part of online is that it can be a little overwhelming sometimes. So I think it's equally good to try and like balance that a little bit, because I definitely was like doom scrolling like really hard for a while, but then I tried to like scale that back. My hot tip is like turn off the notifications on like, you know, like Facebook, and you know, don't see that little red like bop bop 10 10, you know. I did that. It made me check it less. You know, I was less like, oh my God, something popped up, I got to turn that off. And then it became a little more like I was in control of it. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna look at it right now, and then I'll, you know, put it down.
Let's go to you being the senior art director for Columbia Records. What are the key responsibilities that you have as the senior art director?
Yes. So this is a good question. I'm gonna preface it with that. You know, if there's anyone listening to this that is like interested in music design, the path for me was always a little. It wasn't as linear. So I think a lot of people who work in something that's like an ad agency or a design agency of some kind, it's a very straightforward, like, you know, once you kind of climb the layers of art direction, it's kind of like, okay, like when you're a designer, you design things, and then when you become an art director, you work with other designers. And it's a little more of a clear path. For me, working in music, it's a lot. And so the answer to this question is like, what do you do? I have a lot of wild responsibilities, which is cool. I wasn't, you know, I kind of built up to it. So where I'm at right now, what I do as a senior art director, so you know, I do design just like any other designer, making everything from physical to digital. So that would be like album cover art, excuse me, album cover art, single cover art, album packages, physical packages, like special packages, vinyl, not as many CDs, but that whole, you know, posters, the whole 9 yards. And then there's this other side, which is all like the digital stuff, you know, like, you know, content for DSPs, any kind of like Instagram things, all kinds of stuff like that. I also sometimes direct things for motion or create assets for that. Sometimes I'm illustrating, sometimes I'm designing. And then a lot of times as a senior, I have opportunities to give opportunities to other people. So maybe an artist wants to work with an illustrator. I'm able to, suggest some illustrators and then work with them to create the art, things of that nature. I'll work with other people in my department to make this happen. And another big aspect of my job as well is like doing photo shoots. So I will pull together an entire team to create like a content. So maybe the content's for an album shoot, or maybe it's, just for press or publicity, but I'm working with a team. And then I also do creative direction, which is a lot of like top level ideas. So maybe I'm having the ideas, but I might not be executing them. A lot of times I am executing them. But it's a little bit of everything. And like, maybe if you think about it like this way, like if you think about like a conductor like in an orchestra, right? Like how an art director, how a creative director is kind of like that, right? Like a conductor knows music, they can read music, they know the history of music, but their job is to bring a bunch of other musicians and like let them shine, get them all on the same page, make music together. And it's something bigger than yourself. You're, creating something new art together. And for me, that is my job, is that, musicians already have their arts, they're the artists. So I'm basically helping lend a visual context to an intangible art. But for me, it's almost like being like a steward. It's like, I'm here to help them, make their vision.
All right. So you do a lot of things as the art director, right? First is, but I love the part wherein you said you put visual context on intangible art. Yeah. So we'll go back to that later. But as the art director, right now you're working from home. Is that right?
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah.
But before you used to go to the office?
I did. Yeah. It's kind of interesting because what I do, you don't really have to be in an office for. Everything I'm able to do, because we're able to have, Zoom and, email and work on your computer. The photo shoots are harder to do because, we couldn't travel for a while. We actually couldn't do shoots for a while. I've been doing like remote directing. So, because you want the team to be as small as possible. So I will put people together and like come up with creative, and we'll do all this remotely. And then sometimes I dial in during the shoot. Sometimes I'm like, hey, you guys got this, you don't need me there on the screen, just do your thing. So that's been one of the challenges for sure. But everything else has actually been able to adapt. And I think we're supposed to, this is not going to age well. We're supposed to go back next month. And I'll be like, a year from now, like, I'm still at home. So we'll see kind of how that rolls. But it has been really cool that this is the kind of job that has been blessed with being able to work from home and be flexible as well.
Yeah. So it's really a big adjustment. I work in marketing, and it's almost like it's like that. Yeah, when we do, like, of course, I have to manage some photo shoots as well, but it's so hard doing it remotely, even if there's Zoom and everything. But it's different when you're actually there. And you're there real time. Okay, so what are the joys that you find in your work? What makes you happy about being the senior art director of Columbia Records?
I think the best feeling in the world is if you do a good job and your client is happy and you see the fans be happy. Do you know what I mean? Because like I'm helping my client connect to their fans. And so if people can connect to the music and the art is a way to kind of get them into that, that's just so joyful to me, just to see, people be happy. Because it's kind of like what I always wanted to do, is like I wanted a job that had some kind of meaning, or a job that like, helped make a little bit of a difference. Like there's so much crappy things in the world, but if you can bring just a little bit of light to someone, even if you just make someone happy for a minute, they see something like, oh, like that's so cool, like that brought me joy, like that's what I get out of it. And I think sometimes people will see my job and be like, oh my God, you worked with this person and you did this thing. And like, that's so cool. But like, I honestly think that sometimes like it is cool, but it's not about me or that. It's like, oh, like, can the art bring something to somebody? Can that, spark them into something? Like,
Have some impact.
yeah, have some impact. I like someone once sent me a message and was like, I saw a graphic design that you did on Pentatonics, and that was like one of the first bands I ever worked on. And they were like, I want to be a graphic designer now too. And I seriously cried. Like that, I never thought about that, that like, hey, like things that you do, even small little things that you don't think about, like that can actually help somebody. And that's the power of music and art and all that kind of stuff. So to me, it's like this big privilege, and I don't take it lightly. It's just, that means a lot.
Did you plan on working in, translating music into visual art? Some people have that, like from the beginning, this is what they really wanted. But at the end of the day, they go somewhere else. Like me, I graduated journalism, but I'm in marketing right now.
Oh,
So
cool. Yeah, but you can probably draw parallels to like the things that you like and like how you use those into what you are. So to answer your question, I don't think like when I was like in high school, I was like, oh my God, I want to be a, graphic designer, or like I want to work in music. But I always thought that like music design was the coolest. So like when I was younger, I was like, music design's so cool. Like, how do people do that? Like, that's awesome. And then like when I was in college, like you take all these different classes, like, oh, like oil painting. I did like a mural painting class. I was like, this is cool. My mom was like, you should be an art therapist now. Like, like there are all these
yeah.
different things that, like that are cool. But I had this internship with this really cool dude, Brian Gruner. He's like a local graphic designer, and he did all these amazing like music packages, and he did like branding and stuff like that too. But he'd actually like won a Grammy for like his art, and like, not that like trophies are a big thing, but it was like, oh my God, like this dude like does music and graphic design. And I was just like, this is so cool. And I actually got to intern with him and learned so much. And that really set me on my path. He was just kind of like this like Jedi dude that was like, like how all this good advice, and I learned so much from him. Like I still to this day, like every day I design, I'm like, oh, I think about things that he taught me. There's this one really awesome musician we worked with, Mike Brown, and like he was just he is like this incredible musician. He's so creative. He like went across country for 2 years and like like recorded music with all these cool people. And one day he came to the office with just like a box of Polaroids and was like, what can we do with this? And like he was so cool. It was so, and I was just like it just resonated. I was like, this is so cool. Like I want to do this. And when I had that internship I mentioned before, that was really rough. Like there was people there who were really cool. I'm still in touch with. So if they hear this, it's not you guys. But it was the kind of work, right? The kind of work where I was like, like it's hard on me to be really corporate. Like that doesn't, and some people, they love it, and that's not a knock on them, but you have to kind of like listen to yourself and what makes your heart happy. And I was so happy when I was like, oh, like music and art and like all these weird ideas and everything's different. And I wasn't as happy when I was working on like, okay, everything's very structured and we can't move from this kind of design, and like it just didn't vibe. So, and then my journey from there was like kind of full of like twists and turns, but I still had this passion for music, and so that definitely like guided that whole thing.
Because you said like, of course, yeah, you have like different kind of experience with internships or with agencies or wherever you worked at, and because currently, like, I thought you are working in a really big company, and normally
Now I
I
am.
always have the feeling like that
Yeah.
exactly those big companies are the ones that are more like really structured and like in terms of agencies, like count every minute on a project and they tell you how long it should take to come up with a design idea and stuff like that. And like from my experience, I always had the feeling that it was more like the smaller agencies who had a little bit more freedom in doing that. And I just wanted to know, like, if you, with your current workspace and stuff like that, if you have the same experience, or would you say there's something else out there, a big company, which grants you all the freedom?
I think that's something that people aren't always super real with you about, but it's very true. So, smaller design boutique agency or something like that, like you've got like a few coworkers and you have these projects, and there generally is a little more flexibility. Like there's upsides, there's downsides. I worked with like a lot of like indie music people before I was, with like the big company. And it was like, yeah, with indie music, I had a lot more maybe creative freedom, but there was not as much protection. So like people might not ever pay you, or like, some people might be kind of jerks, and believe me, there are jerks in the big leagues too, like a lot of them.
Everywhere.
Right, but I have health insurance in the HR department, so it's like there's pros and cons. I do now work for a big corporation, and there's things that come with that, and capitalism, and that could be a whole podcast. It's definitely different. And I think when you're trying to find those spaces, I think that like maybe when you're in like college, like you have these sort of like starry-eyed glasses where you're just like, who's the coolest person doing the coolest thing. And I also feel like sometimes it can be like a little clout chasey, or just like I want my resume to like have all this kind of stuff. But I think an important lesson is that like that stuff doesn't matter. That stuff doesn't feed you. It doesn't pay your rent. You have to find what makes you fulfilled as a person, and you'll find like maybe you thrive in a smaller environment. Maybe you can handle being in like a bigger environment, but your boundaries. So, and that's why things like internships, or reaching out to other designers and asking them about their experience is like an invaluable thing, because then you can like learn more about yourself and like what is good for you. And some people become freelancers too, where they're just like, I'm going to set my own parameters, and that's a whole thing too. And like if you're a freelancer, like half of your job is hustling and doing the technical part of the job, not just like the fun part. So do I prefer one to the other? Maybe ask me in a few years when I'm like seasoned human. But I think like right now I'm in that phase of like, all right, like I did one thing, trying this thing, maybe I'll try something else. And every little thing sort of counts towards the next.
Yeah, it's always changing. Like, I think when you asked me after uni and would say, oh, going freelance, no, thank you. But you never know what's happening. And like, as you said, with internships or with working at agencies or with different people, you kind of like start figuring out. And I think it never stops. Like, I won't say that I'm always a freelancer. Maybe in a few years I decide like, I want to have something different. And then that's it.
For like internships, do you agree that like going for an internship on a bigger company at a bigger company versus doing an internship at a smaller boutique agency, which one would be more beneficial for somebody who is starting out in the design industry?
I think very truly that's a personal question of whoever's doing it. Like, I don't think I could say universally, you should do one versus the other. I think you have to kind of like, for instance, in my case, I was like not the kid that was doing like Swiss design, like very on the grid and like clean and pretty. Like I could do that. And I was like, I could do that. I don't care. Like I want to be messy and I want to like do weird things. And thankful to my professors who were not like, stop, do what we want. They're like, okay, but like I was a little like, all over the place. And that's part of your design journey, right? Is that like, I think sometimes you're expected to already be a junior and like have a set style and set the world on fire. But like college is your time to like experiment. But even after college, you can still experiment. You can still evolve your style. So knowing what you know about yourself up to that point, it can help you make that decision. I think that a big corporate kind of internship, you will learn a lot. working with different kinds of people and fast-paced environments. I think if you choose a smaller setting, you might get more individual attention and then be able to form a lot of like, you know, meaningful relationships that can continue afterwards. Not that you can't at a bigger one either, but I think you may have to go out of your way to bring people in. So as a designer, and it also I think depends on the kind of design work that you want to go on to do. So I think there's a lot of people that intern at like maybe larger companies or like internal design groups, and you know, you keep those relationships up with the people in that company, and sometimes like, you know, they'll hire from the people that they knew as interns. That's a common thing. I think that if you maybe start in a more like, you know, smaller kind of vibe, but more artistic, that could be really great for your portfolio and just for your own personal knowledge. And then, you know, sometimes those people can recommend you to other people. I really think it would depend on like your design style and like personality wise, like what's helpful for you too.
For you, structure is a bit more, it limits your creative style, right? I think it's all about your personality and what your objectives are when you are looking for an internship, right? Because if you're looking for a bit more business side of things, a bigger company would. Do you agree that a bigger company would be much better for that?
Yeah.
You mentioned a while ago also that if it's a smaller company, you get a little bit more attention because there are fewer of you.
Yeah. Kind of like school. Yeah.
What about your style? When did you discover that you had, this is my style? This is going to be my style and it's going to be my signature. Did you know about it long before, or like you just kind of tried to figure it out as you went along?
Yes, this is a very good question. And 100% my answer to you is different now than it would have been like 5 years ago. Those of you listening can take this with as many grains of salt as you want, because I think design is so open and so subjective that everyone's going to have a different opinion. There really isn't one right way or one wrong way. But I can tell you the truths that are my personal truths, which is like, to me, I think we put too much pressure on people to have a style and stick with that. And when you're like, 19, 21 and you're expected to know everything, that's not fair to you. And you can evolve. That's the cool thing. You can do art at any age. It's never too late to do that. And it's okay to evolve and change. I think that's a good thing. If you're always set on one way, it might become boring, or you might kind of be stuck in a place, and that's upsetting. I think it's important to have a voice, and I think there's a difference between style, like I always use this kind of configuration or arrangement or colors, and versus like having a portfolio that has a little bit of like consistency or a point of view. When I now am hiring people, if I look at a portfolio and, this piece of art is really cool and really amazing, and then I see 3 pieces that are, definitely not the same quality as this one, it makes you look inconsistent. It's not necessarily the style could be different. It's just the fact that like maybe these ones you can tell the person didn't take as much time on. So that would make me pause to be like, what am I going to get? And that's why your portfolio is really important, to like show your best work, but to show like consistency. That doesn't always mean it has to be rigid. So finding your style is like the ultimate question. Like every graphic designer is asked that. Like there's books and books and books by people about it. And I feel like there's this very like old school kind of way. And I'm happy to see more people kind of breaking free of that. I definitely obsessed over that when I was younger, to a point that like I think it was like harmful to me, and I was like, because I could do all different kinds of styles. I could be messy, I could be clean, like I could do music stuff, I could make it look corporate, but I didn't like that, but like I could, like, and so that really did my head in for a very long time. I was like, I don't have a style, I don't have a point of view, like what's my point of view? And then I kind of like, once you start putting your stuff up next to each other, like, oh, there are things between my pieces that are similar, but also the fact that like I could do a lot of things, I kind of learned to embrace that, you know what I mean? And like work on being able to execute it really well. So, you know, the fact that I can do a bunch of different styles or work in different genres now is kind of the reason that I have the job that I have. And I also know my limits. I know when I am not right for something, and I'll suggest someone who would be. I think finding your style is something that happens throughout your whole life. It evolves. That's a good thing, not a bad thing. And I think just like maybe obsessing less about like, what is your style? And thinking a little more on like, what is my point of view? Like, what am I trying to portray? How am I trying to, you know, help my client? What is my process? Because process could actually really inform where your style gets to. So for me, process wise, I never really super loved working in Adobe Illustrator, and I had to force myself to get better at it. But I loved working with like real media, and to this day, a lot of my process is like analog stuff, or how I can incorporate pieces of analog into a digital world. And so just that process set me on a certain quote unquote style path.
Okay. So right now, based on what you said, versatility is vital. You have to be able to adapt to what is needed. So when you're creating a design, yeah, what are the things that you look for? Okay, there's this project, and then these are the things that I look for before I even start on working on this project. What are those things for you?
So I would say that, like, you know, there are designers that are a little more like me, you would say like a generalist, that kind of have this wide toolbox. There are people who are specialists, you know, who like their jam is doing like amazing like handwritten letters. I think as someone who's a little more on the generalist side, I'm aware of like trends, and you know, I love music, so I'm always listening to music. So I'll answer this from a music perspective, right? So I try to listen to lots of different kinds of music, see all kinds of cool art, and so have this sort of general like, all right, like what's going on right now, what has come in the past that's really cool. And for me, a lot of times, like, you know, a client comes to us, or, you know, a marketing person or the label or the manager or the artist directly. And, you know, the music is, well, usually it's done. Sometimes it's in process. And sometimes I get to hear it, which is cool. Sometimes I actually don't, but I get it described to me. But there's usually a conversation about the vibe, the kind of music. And a lot of times artists know something that they're interested in. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're like, I don't know, I'll know it when I see it. And that's its own kind of like, oh God. You know, music is art. So musicians have like, they might be like, oh, there's a color that comes to mind when I play this. Or sometimes if someone doesn't know, I actually ask a series of questions. You know, what are you listening to? Like what kind of art do you like? What kind of art do you hate? what do you absolutely dislike? So I don't do it. Sometimes too, it's like if they don't know any of that stuff, I'm like, okay, but how do you want your fans to feel? Like, what do you want them to feel when they hear this, when they see this? And I think that they always know from there, like, oh, I want them to feel uplifted, or oh, like I want them to rock out, or like, you know, whatever it is. Asking these sorts of questions and being very like open in your dialogue, and you know, not being afraid to ask more questions, I think for me is how I'm able to think about stuff. And so a lot of times too, if I have the luxury of time, I will put together almost like a mini mood board. It's sort of like a way to be like, here's some art styles that are cool, like, do you like this kind of thing? I would never take that and then copy it. It's for me a way to see if we can align. So if they're just like, oh yeah, I really like impressionistic paintings, I would be like, okay, awesome. Why don't we hire a really cool artist? Here's some really amazing people that I've been seeing lately. Would you like to commission any of these people who like create original art? And like that art could be your cover. And it's a little like how that process works.
You look at the trends, and then you look at the artists themselves, the ones who made the music, and you try to marry both the trends and the intentions, or like the vision of the musician on how they want to make the visuals consistent with the message of their music, right? Is that correct?
It is correct. And every project is different and every musician is different. Some musicians don't care about trends. In fact, they don't want it to be trendy. And some musicians want it to be very personal. And if you work with a more established artist, they have established branding. Are we evolving them to a next tier? Are we keeping it consistent? Because like sometimes you follow bands and you're just like, that was completely out of nowhere, but it's cool. Or that was completely out of nowhere. Like, I don't know what they were thinking. And I will get very in my head about that. Sometimes there'll be musicians who like I'm not as familiar with their music. So I try to like method act as like, if I was a fan, like what would I love to see and what would be cool? And sometimes like that's not a factor. Sometimes like music is very personal. And so the art just needs to resonate with the musician only. And sometimes it's all about the fans and the fan experience. So there's a lot of things to think about. And I'm the kind of person that will have that conversation. And I think that honesty is important because, ultimately it's their music, it's their baby.
You mentioned a while ago that sometimes the music is done, but sometimes it's not yet done. So I would imagine it's difficult to create a design wherein the music isn't done yet. How do you work around that?
It's a good question. And I just ask more questions. Like, what's the vibe? Like,
You just have that conversation with them.
yeah.
Once the music is done, is there any instance before that you already did the design and you already talked to the musician, but turns out when the music was done, it wasn't really, at par with how did you handle that kind of situation?
No, that totally happens. There are a million unforeseen circumstances. Things happen that are out of your control. Like sometimes, a song happens and then they're like, oh, we actually like this other song instead. So we're going to completely do something different. Or things do change, or they'll be like, you know what, we're going to rearrange the schedule. And now the thing you thought you had to do in 2 weeks is due in a day. Like these things happen for sure. And it's just about communication and offering solutions. So I don't take things super personally when it comes to art because art is subjective. And I think that's also something that comes in time because sometimes because like your job as an artist is kind of making something from nothing, it is personal, it is a piece of yourself. Even if you're doing it for somebody else, it can be like, oh, I didn't like my thing, like where did I do wrong? And it really isn't you know what I mean? You're doing your best and that's all anyone could expect of you. And art is art. Some people are going to love it, some people are going to hate it. That's kind of cool in and of itself. So you have to learn to like roll with it a little bit. And like I don't have an ego when it comes to that stuff, so I'm a problem solver. That's kind of where my perspective is. So if someone's like, like I just don't get this, I'll be like, okay, anything about this that you do like? Do we like colors? Do we like, this font? No? Let's start over. Let's do something else. Oh, you like this and you like this? Easy. Let's try a different color. Let's try turning it upside down. Trying different things and being open to it, I think sometimes leads you to really cool art.
I'm pretty sure you had your share of feedback, especially, early on in your career. Did you used to handle it the same way as you're handling it right now?
I used to take things way more personally. So if you get nothing else from this thing, please, as an artist, you are amazing and you are valid. And like, don't listen to people who are jerks to you. They're probably jealous and they have bad taste. like just don't. I don't know. I like when I was younger, I definitely had like some experiences with like just like people who would say rude stuff and like I did a portfolio review and this like old white guy was like, oh, like your portfolio is horrible, it's terrible, and you're never gonna do anything or be anybody, and you're like he like said this stuff and it was so hurtful, and it was just like it was like I don't see you being a designer, and I was so mad. I was like, I'm gonna show you, buddy. Sometimes people give you very valid criticism, right? Where it's like, hey, this is inconsistent, or what if you try some new things? And it's important to be open to that. But I don't know if it was like being a young girl or like, sometimes there are people who are just horrible and you can't let that stop you because they're just wrong.
How did you respond to that guy though?
I mean, I think I was shell shocked in person at the actual moment. I was just polite and like afterwards just had, kind of a meltdown. And then I talked to my friends and got it together and was like, yeah, no, this guy is wrong. And I know it. I know that I'm capable. I know that I can learn. I know that I can improve. But anyone who tells you that you can't or that you're not good enough, that person is not good enough. So don't listen to them. That's noise. You let that go. I wish that, designers don't have to have those kind of experiences. That's why like I always try really hard to like mentor or like be good to the people who are interns, because I remember what it felt like to have someone be really horrible.
I mean, when did you graduate sort of from being that young mind, young person?
You go to school and there's this very like school mindset and the world has to be a certain way because this is what we all learned. And then you like, get your first few jobs and you have some maybe not so great encounters and, you get a little season and you learn stuff. But then you have good stuff too. Like you have these amazing clients who take a shot at you and like, you get to do more stuff and that like builds your confidence. I've had maybe like 3 big points. The first point was when my mentor took me on for the internship, because that really like made me be like, yeah, music design is really cool and I can do this. The second was when I got a gig with Lucasfilm. So I was like consistently like freelancing design for merchandise. And that art director was really cool because he was like, I see that your portfolio is like rock and roll, like music stuff, but I also see that you like to draw and that you like Star Wars. But you could take your graphic design, rock and roll style and apply that to the IP of Star Wars. And I was like, yeah, I could do that. That's really cool. I love Star Wars. And it was like taking a fandom that I had, but then being a professional about it. And then like I did like a series of like nerdy sweater patterns, but like it was really cool. And so that was another really good point where like I learned a lot about, how you can take things that you like and apply them into other things. And then the third turning point was when things that I had done between those two were seen by art director I work with at Columbia. He saw my work and was like, I would love for you to meet you and for you to like to come to Sony and meet everybody, because the job at Sony, like being an art director and now I'm a senior art director, is doing a little bit of everything. So it was like, yeah, sometimes you have to design merch. Sometimes you have to work with people who have weird personalities. All these little things that I had like done throughout my time kind of coalesced. So maybe I didn't go to a really fancy design school or, come from this like, super fancy place, but all my little experiences and the fact that like I did learn how to deal with different personalities, I can, work in different styles. But that was what they were looking for. They were looking for someone who had those kind of talents. And then on your job, you learn more. So did I know how to, do a whole photo shoot and all that kind of stuff? No, but then I had mentors there that taught me how to do that. Now I can teach somebody else. So I think that's, circling back, like that's part of it as well, is that throughout your career, you're going to keep learning. You're going to learn on the job. It's okay. Sometimes you make mistakes, you learn from those, you grow from those, and then you just kind of keep on evolving. Like, talk to me in a few more years. I'm excited to see what future is doing,
You keep mentioning the mentorship. Did you find your mentor or did your mentor find you?
Yeah, I mentioned that a lot because I think that a lot of people who are probably listening to this might not have like gotten to the point where they're like solid in their career yet. If you are, keep going, you got this. But if you're not there yet, I feel like when I was at that point, I didn't have a lot of people talking openly about this kind of stuff. So I would have really liked to have heard someone talk more about these things. We had a local sort of like a design portfolio review showcase kind of thing with my college. So he was one of the people that came to it. And also just like with the Lucasfilm art director, I had my, business cards, but I also asked them for their information too, because art directors, now I understand more. At the time I was like, why is no one getting back to me? Now I'm like, oh gosh, they probably have a million emails. I get it now. But like, it's important to like follow up, right? So even if you give someone like your business card or like, you know, if you're exchanging like, you know, online information or whatever, always ask if you can politely. Don't email them every single day, but like, you know, if it's been a week or two since you've heard from them, it's okay to follow up, because like when I think in both instances I didn't hear right away, followed up. Oh my gosh, yes, I was meaning to write you. Oh, I'm so glad you wrote to me. Yes, I'm glad I wrote to you too. So keeping up with those things is good too. And I mean, you don't always have that magical connection. Sometimes, you know, they don't have the work, but you can always ask and say, hey, like, please feel free to send my stuff along to your colleagues. Like, you never know, like, you know, a friend of a friend might be looking for a designer, and, you know, there you go.
So for you, having a mentor is really important, or you can do without having a mentor, just learn as you go along.
Yeah, it could be both ways. I think a lot of us are self-taught on the internet. You, as an artist, it's really ultimately about your portfolio. No one's ever asked me, what grade did you get on that third art history class test?
Everybody, you heard that? Your grades do not define you.
Stay at school. Stay at school. Yeah.
Work on your portfolio.
Yeah, if you just wanted to say, like, if you have of the questions that we sometimes get from ARMY on our Discord or on Twitter are exactly like, someone is really young or kind of graduating right now, and or they haven't even studied anything with design, but they are doing a lot of fandom work or doing all those fake briefing concepts, graphics, yeah, everything. And they are like, yeah, but I haven't studied design. And I'm always like, I don't know how it is with every country, but where I am, seriously, as long as your portfolio like has all the stuff that the company or the agency like needs, you where you studied is like not really relevant.
Yeah, I agree to that.
For you, Annie, what do you think about that? Is it important for you to have like the formal education to go into the business of design, or is it more important to have the portfolio more versatile and prepared?
Totally. I feel like the three things we just touched on now, we could literally talk about for like 5 hours. I have so many passionate feelings about all of this stuff. So I'm going to remind everyone listening, you can take lots of salt, take all the grades. These are my opinions, right? You might talk to somebody else, they're going to tell you something else. But personally, I think question number one, is it more important to have formal education versus self-taught? This is art. Everything's subjective. And ultimately, people do look at your portfolio, right? So you can watch internet videos and learn how to do things and have an amazing portfolio. So no, you don't really have to. Going to school gives you a lot of benefits that we can get into in a second. But the general answer is that it's your portfolio. So that's what people look at. Are there some jerks in this world that are like, oh, you didn't go to fancy school, I won't even give you the time of day? I don't want to work for that person. Like, I don't, if that's how you judge people, by the number next to their name or whatever, like, we're not going to vibe. But I will say that if you go to school for, you know, design, you do learn certain fundamental things. And sometimes I think, you know, like college is also about like learning how to deal with people, and there's pros and cons. It's not for everybody. We all know people that that does not work for, but you might be the kind of person that you need that structure. It's really helpful. People help you with your portfolio. The other thing too, the power and privilege of going to a school, but also like the connections you get therein. So if you are able to go to a very elite school, I was not, people will say, it doesn't matter, I went to this fancy school and I had a bad time and whatever. But you know, you have access to these professors and you have the privilege of being in the proximity of people who are like the job getters and all that kind of stuff. And I think that needs to be acknowledged, that there is sort of like this inherent privilege that you do have access to things that those of us that maybe went to not the most famous place ever didn't have that type of access. It doesn't mean that you can't be someone if you don't go to that school. And that's something that I learned myself. I think I had a little bit of a chip for a while, being like, oh, like I'm not good enough because I didn't get into this. But that's not true. wherever you are, you're on your journey, and that's going to make you the unique artist that you are, and that's awesome. And if you get to be in one of those cool places, don't take that for granted for a second. You do all the things you can do.
Yeah.
And if you don't, that's fine. You know what I mean? Because wherever you are in the world, you are a part of your local community. And there are people there that you can connect with, that you can make meaningful art with. Sometimes working with like the biggest people, not the people we're here to talk about, but like other people, that's not always a good experience. Like clout and that stuff doesn't pay your rent. But if you do something for somebody local, and like, maybe you paint a really cool mural, or like maybe you work on a design that like helps people in your community go to an event that makes your community better, that is it. Like, that is so cool and worthwhile. And that's the power of design. Wherever you are, whatever school you go to as a designer, like, you are going to come away with portfolios. There are more opportunities to get internships and things like that, learn a lot of different kinds of media. But again, if you can't afford it, or you can't go there, then your portfolio is really, the important piece. To that point, I will also add, in art, there are no rules. You could have your style, you can do what you want to do. That's awesome. When you get into a job, there are technical things that you have to do, right? So there's this level of technical proficiency, which you're going to level up on. Maybe you work a job that's a little less glamorous, and it teaches you to be really fast and do your key cuts. I do believe in like, learn the rules and then break them, right? So, if you know your programs, you know how things have to go out to the world. Like for me, like just the practical side, if I make cover art, it has to be it's got to be like 15 by 15 and 300 DPI. And there's like very technical things that you do have to know how to do. And you can't just make something cool on your phone and like throw it out to the world. Or if you do, you have to know how to res it up. There are technical things that you would learn in school. If you don't go to school, then you gotta learn that, because there are people who have amazing portfolios, but then they can't back it up either as time consistency, being able to interact with people, or actually like technically doing your work. When you get interviewed, people will ask you like, what are your proficiencies? What are the programs that you use? Tell me how you made this. And if you can speak to your story, and if you can speak to your process, that will help you get hired and get the jobs and resonate with like the people you need to.
What I also think, like especially with you mentoring a mentor, is when you go to university, you get feedback a lot, and you might not have that if you like learn by yourself, or learn graphic design beside university or anything else. And I think as soon as you get like your artwork out, or ask for feedback, or find someone that you look up to and maybe ask them how would they improve this, or like just getting feedback is also like really good in growing and like covering the part which you like maybe have in university, as you have to please the professors and you have to please other people and you get a lot of feedback.
Like training for the real world.
It's true.
So many avenues right now to get feedback aside from formal schooling. So what I got from there is that when you go to university or like colleges, you get the fundamentals in, and then you are within proximity of people who can give you constructive feedback.
Yeah.
And because of that network that you already have while you're in school, I mean, you mentioned that you will have access to professors
and your own classmates.
Then you open yourself up to opportunities in the future, like with the connections that you will have in school, and those who are already seniors in the field. And lastly, you also get to have the technical proficiency that you mentioned a while ago, which you will be able to know about it if you self learn, but you'll be able to polish it better if you are also in school. But at the same time, if you don't go to a formal education system for design, it still teaches you a lot of things. Like, you have a little bit more freedom. Well, you don't have to pay for it. That's for sure.
Exactly. In design, it's like, okay, if I'm not going to go to this school, then like you have to self-discipline yourself and be like, I'm going to learn, I'm going to reach out, I'm going to find these other resources. It might be a little bit more of a difficult journey as long as you understand that going into it. But even with school, if you don't pay attention or like do your homework, like, and your homework is with creating your portfolio, yeah, you might as well not have gone to school. So, and the other thing too is that, like, the classmates that you work with, you never know, like, maybe, networking is a sort of thing, right? Like, where, like, some people dive so into it that they stop seeing people as people. And that's not what networking is. Like, to me, it should be more organic. But to the point of networking, like, a lot of times the people that you come up with, either, like, your online friends who are doing fan art with you, or the people in your classes, you might work with them someday, or they might be able to, like, get you a gig someday. You never know. And if nothing else, like, it's good to have people cheering you on. It's not a competition. And I think that sometimes schools, like, you feel like you have to, like, I have to beat this person, I have to, like, get this attention. But I think it's more important to look at it from the perspective of, like, compete with yourself. Like, I want to learn more, I want to, like, improve for myself. You have to like tap into your inner, like, shonen hero, like, I'm gonna be the very best. I'm catching them all, but I'm not gonna hurt this other person.
You mentioned networking a while ago. Like, how did you end up working with BTS on this project?
I'm gonna preface everything with, like, I am, like, the most grateful person on the planet, because, like, I was Army before. I'm sort of like the era of Wings had just happened, and I was like, wait, I missed it. And then, like, like, Love Yourself was happening, and I was like, this is so cool. But then it turns out I actually had been listening, according to Spotify, I'd been listening to them since 2016, and, like, I just didn't make the connection. And it also, I thought those Harlem Shake guys were, like, just really funny college dudes, and I'm forever mad that I didn't, like, look into it further. That was, like, my favorite Harlem Shake of all time. Like, man, those college dudes are hilarious. They have a really nice dorm room, though. Yeah. So, and I will also preface this with, like, this is like, I'm not one of the main team. Like, that crew of people are so amazing. Like, I'm such, like, a nerd for, like, all the amazing art. I, like, collect all the packaging because I just think it's, like, the most amazing. I actually used to do, like, threads about, like, oh my god, this is, like, what I think is going to be happening because of this meaning of this font. I still hold to this. Yeah. Oh man, theorist right here. And this is also sort of the thing about working in music design too, is I think maybe some people on the outside might look at it and be like, I really want to work with, my favorite band. So everything that I do in my life is going to lead up to making that happen. And that is the exact wrong way to look at it, because sometimes it's like you put too much eggs in a basket, and either it doesn't happen or you're disappointed. And life is a long journey. Like, you're only, your age for this year, and then you have your whole life. So your career spans. But to my journey, a lot of little things sort of leading up to other things, I think you kind of have to, like, trust that pattern. So it's like, how did you get to do this sort of thing? As we've been talking about, I had this journey. I got to Sony. At the time, I was working for across all the different labels. And someone from Colombia, I think, was like, hey, do you know this band BTS? And I was like, yes, I've heard of them.
Maybe.
Maybe. I'm familiar with a song or two, just one or two. Hides Twitter. And they're like, yeah, we're looking for someone who, like, knows a little bit about them, and we're trying to, like, put together stuff for this song that hasn't come out yet called Boy with Love. So my first assignment ever was actually, I was asked to do a radio cover for Boy with Love. It was, like, just a tiny little content piece, but I was, like, so excited because, the song is so good. It's, like, to this day, my favorite song.
Yeah.
Like, Spotify always does those raps, and it's like, you listen to this song too much, but I love it. It's so good. So I did that, and basically, like, I'm, like, a very far removed sort of person that, like, does stuff with Columbia, who then reaches out to big hits. So, like, I don't have, like, contact. I definitely want to make that very clear. So when Map of the Soul 7 era happened, they needed a single cover for On featuring Sia. And one of the crew had remembered that I did that. And so they asked me, oh, like, you've done a couple of, like, content pieces, we only have a week, but can you come up with designs for the song? And I was like, oh yeah, totally. And I got to see all the art and, like, the style guides, and I basically did a lot of, like, very branded looking versions. But I wasn't super happy with them. And so the last page of the deck, I just did a drawing of her, but like in the style. And they picked that like right away. That was what everyone picked. And I was just floored because I figured, well, I'm trying to do that thing, which is not me, which is like be branded, be very consistent, whatever. And then like the one that I did that was just like, well, as an army, like I went wild. And no one, this was just for you guys, but like, there's 7 colors, and then the 8th color is lavender for, army. But bringing that aspect, that was what they picked. So it's kind of a little bit of a lesson in like being yourself, bringing what you know, what you love, being professional, but doing that kind of thing. So these were like these sort of like small things. I was like, I'm just so happy I could help in a very small way. It was just so cool. And the feedback was really easy. There, like everyone was just like really rad. And that was that. And then flash forward now to like Dynamite era. And I was asked to work on these 2 video content pieces. And then by that point, I was trying to, and I had experience before working on visualizers. I'd worked on visualizers for a bunch of other Sony bands. And I've been at that point getting more into working with other people. So somebody animates, I create like the content pieces, and like I direct it and come up with like the board of like, oh, this is what I want to happen. And so I had that experience. I'd done a little bit of that for other people. And again, it was like remembered the stuff that I had done, and they were like, oh yeah, okay, so she can help on this kind of content. The first one was the 70s remix, and that was like really wild because again, it was like we have like very limited time. It was like a week and a half.
Sometimes great ideas are born when you don't have a lot of time.
Yeah, and like so that's also part of it too. It was like, and it was a very collaborative sort of thing where it wasn't like I'm taking credit for this thing. No, I had this amazing animator editor, and the client also had feedbacks as well. Like there's a new song, it's special just for Army. I think Krista, who was like the animator, was like, well, what about something that's like more like a pop-up video? And I was like, oh, this could be really cool because it could be like special things just for Army that like only Army will know. And so then like the client had ideas too, like, oh, we want a really cool filter, or here's the kinds of facts that we want. And so it was back and forth really cool. I made all of the like typography, and I went really hard because I was like, oh, like we have to use that really iconic sort of 70s font because that'll give it gravity, and we can do all these like really cool effects. And like it was really fun to sort of dive in on all that stuff. There was a part towards the end where a client wanted to add photos of the guys that had already been published on Facebook. And I was like, oh, we've already seen them. Like, is there anything new? Or I was like, oh, what if I could hire an illustrator to do an illustration? So I, in like 10 minutes, drew like a really quick, like RM winking, just to be like, this kind of like 70s style, like, because I couldn't say with my words what I was thinking. So I drew it, and they were like, yeah, let's have everybody else drawn in this style. And I was like, no, I do that. Like, I want to give this opportunity to someone. And they were like, no, we want that one. And I was like, oh my God. So I freaked out. I had 8 hours to draw it, but I did it. And I was so grateful for the opportunity. It was so much fun. Like, even though it was like a high pressure situation, it was joyful and it was cool. And it was cool because it came from the musicians. And even though like, sometimes you work on projects where it's a really big act, you have layers of your own label, they have layers of their label. But when you work with clients who music for healing and like really believe in like art and music, that is such a precious joy and a privilege to just do something little and cool and joyful. And so I had no idea that people would resonate with it and just have so much fun. And like that made me so happy just to know that other people were happy. That was the goal, was to just have a really great time.
And with how many people did you work? So you worked with an animator and...
Yeah, and myself, and that was us. We had like layers of like project manager and manager and their interpreters, everybody. So it was layers, but the actual like who was making the art was 2 people. I did a tiny little thing. I was glad to help a little, but it was like a cool experience. And so then like we not even like a week and a half later, I got another call, and I was so tired. I like I burned the midnight oil. I was up for like whatever 48 hours times 4 is. Side note, don't do that. This is an exception. But then I got this note that was like, yeah, everyone really liked how this went, so we need you to do the cover art for Savage Love. And I was like, what? And I got to hear the song ahead of time, which was kind of rare. So I heard that really awesome like rap verse, and I was like, did JK just swear? And like it, but the rap verse was so cool. And I was like, this is deep and cool, and like I love it. And so I went full theorist weirdo and like, listen, like in art history, there's this whole thing with like, you know, the cutting of paper and the meaning and the colors. And I was like, this color represents the sand castle. And like, so I went wild, and I was appreciative that everyone let me go full feral and just like, you know, try and like listen to the music and communicate it. And you know, the feedback was really good. That was one where I went through lots and lots of like color iterations, and they decided like the colors that they wanted, and that was really cool. Yeah, so absolutely forever grateful, because like what the heck, you know. But you know, if you think about it, like being able to work under pressure on a very tight deadline, by the point I got to that, I had a lot of other experiences that taught me like, okay, turn off your fan for this part of it, get to do what you need to do, be objective, work with people, you know, and be able to create a technical file that, you know, this file has to go across, or make the kinds of assets for my animator that can be layered and can be moved and that he can recreate. He made all those really cool Blender things, and like be able to work on a team, you know, because it's not me, it's their music, and it's this amazing team that's like working really hard together. So yeah, so that's kind of like a little bit of the backstory of how all that came about, and I was just floored. So
It was an entire journey in itself. It started out with you being familiar with them, and then, you know, starting out with the radio cover, and then it evolved from there.
yeah, exactly. Big Hit, which I absolutely love and admire more than anything for, is a lot of their main art, all of their main art, like they will take boutique Korean designers or artists and like elevate them and give them a platform. And I think that is so cool and admirable and amazing. And I wish that more people in the music industry would take that as example. So I have this like great love and appreciation for that. And during this era, and I could, you know, think onwards too, like you've been seeing that the main team will look for artists and can sometimes hire them. I mean, this is my interpretation, obviously. As a designer myself, like if I see someone whose personal work is really rad, I will be like, just like the Lucasfilm art director did to me. I see that you do this really cool rock and roll stuff. Can you do that, but with like Luke and Leia? Like, I'm sure a lot of people listening are like, okay, cool. How do I make this happen? But I think the answer is that as a human, you will be fulfilled if you make the art that makes you happy. And then someone you might not even know will see your art, it'll resonate with them and be like, hey, can you do your thing, but like apply it to myself? And that's the joy of it, for sure.
Yeah, especially because like during your entire BTS journey, the BTS part of your career, right? Most of this stuff that they actually chose are the ones that you seem to be more personal about. Like the ones that you injected a more personal touch. I think it's true that I remember J Hope saying that, you know, sincerity resonates with people, or like people can't miss sincerity. So if you are passionate about your art, and you know you yourself are confident with it, people are going to see that.
Yeah, totally. I think that, I know earlier we were talking about fan art versus pretending that fan art doesn't exist. And that's not the world that we live in. So if you interview someone maybe a little older than me, they'll be like, oh my God, don't put anime in your portfolio, but that's wrong and racist. Like that's just wrong. You make the art that you make, and that's like a part of who you are. And I think that very often, like for instance, I actually hired a fan artist who drew a lot of like awesome like DBZ stuff, because I was asked by like Lil Nas X's team to find like an anime artist who was like a Black artist that could make really cool sparkly anime style. And I was like, oh my God, Asta, perfect person. Like she loves Lil Nas X. She draws fan art of the animes that he likes. And so I suggested this artist, and then she got to work on like the Panini art. Her portfolio is like, as an example, she has fan art, but she also has her art and her jam. It's consistent. Like she has this like really cool sparkly palette. And so it was cool to be like, here's someone who likes the same stuff. He will like her. And they like the same things. So this is a good sort of partnership. Obviously, if you have a portfolio that's all fan art, that might be a little difficult, I would say. But I wouldn't say don't ever put things in there. Like you have to kind of figure out what's appropriate or not appropriate for the audience that you're trying to work in. Like there's a lot of illustrators who they want to work in editorial. A lot of editorial work is doing likenesses. So I've had it happen before where I've been like, oh, like we need a likeness of this artist. And I've hired someone because, oh, they've already drawn this person. I know they know it. Or they've drawn someone who has a similar skin tone. So I know that they can draw the person that I need. And like having those real conversations with people too, I think is important. So I think you'll find that as you get older as a person, hopefully, like you'll find the line between fan art versus your own art. And sometimes fan art is a way to find your own style. I mean, like I'm always changing my drawing style. I was actually, the real backstory of like the 70s drawings is that I was like really unhappy with my art. I suck, which is a terrible thing. You don't suck, that must suck. And I was like, oh, like I really want to like try drawing more. And like I was hanging out with my friends online. We would draw, we're like, let's draw together. Let's hang out, let's be accountable, like let's draw more often. And we were like, let's draw BTS. And so like I was getting inspired though. Sometimes you just find like something that rekindles your connection to your pencil. And so at that time I had been sort of like messing around a little bit. When this happened, I was like, oh, thank God, I'm warmed up now. Let's go.
Yeah, would you say like becoming an army even before having to be able to work with big hit, has it impacted your personal life and your career as well?
Yeah, of course. I mean, what I love is that at its best is this like wonderful community. Like here we are like talking across the world, across a wild circumstance. And like I just feel so comfortable with you. And I think that connection that they bring to everyone is just so beautiful and wonderful, and that music is powerful in small ways. It's kind of like such a radical thing, really, to actually like love yourself, to actually like care about other people truly, you know what I mean? Not in a performative way. And I think that sense of community and that sense, and even like what both of you do and the people that you work with on your Twitter accounts too, like let's get together and like help each other find jobs. Like let's get together and like practice our art. I think that's so amazing and admirable. And what I love about this fandom, it's just so cool and awesome and just genuine. And I've met so many people who have become like amazing friends.
I'm about to cry. Getting emotional.
Yeah, it is emotional. It's cool. I mean, I remember going to the concert. I remember people were like, oh, it's a religious experience. And I was like, that's a little weird to say. And then I went there and I was like, my gosh, my seat is shaking. But it was positive energy. I actually became friends with a girl who photobombed me. My friend and I were taking like cute selfies. This really sweet army like photobombed us in a cute way. And then we exchanged Instagrams and we all talk all the time. We have like a group chat called the Magic Shop. And like the friendships that we made along the way are like the most lovely thing. And I think that music can really inspire you, whatever it is that you do in your career, whether you're an artist. And I think what I love about BTS and their team, like I said before, is that they're not compromising on who they are. They are themselves, which is amazing. And then they like elevate other people around the way. Like you learn about culture, and it's this wonderful global connection that I'm like super, super grateful for. They didn't come out of nowhere. Like they were working really hard for a long time, and genuinely building people up takes a long time, but it's worthwhile. And that circles back to what, the themes of what we're talking about in like my own life, which is like, I didn't just come out of nowhere. Someone was like, here's an amazing job and you got it. And it's like, whatever. It was like, I had really hard times. I had people who were really mean, like to my face about art for no reason, but got through it with the help of my friends and learned to care about myself more and not be so down on myself. So I think, all right, everyone give a group hug.
And you pay it forward. All of your stories, you're always, I mean, you could be doing this project for this artist, but then most of the time you are able to recognize when, if you know somebody who has a more specialized style that will fit for the project, you don't seem to hesitate to give them the opportunity or contact them or connect them. It's so nice to know that people of who are already in your position. I mean, you are recognized so much in the industry. It's so nice to know that you don't just grab all the opportunities, but you actually share them with other artists.
I was the one that contacted you last year from the GVFX account when we released the Dynamite music video.
That was so cool. I watched that so many times. Everyone in that is so talented.
We wanted to get some like video and graphic people together and just whatever their like level of designers, like bring them together and release something. And it was really funny because I know we were working on it. And then I think Savage Love and the Dynamite 70s remix were both released like in about that time. And we were like, oh my gosh, come, let's include this a little bit more. And it was really like fun. And it was really nice to see like you also engaging with us and retweeting. And we were all screaming on Discord.
Oh my gosh. Well, like high key though, sorry to all the other fandoms I've worked for, but like who else is more talented than ARMY? Like honestly though, and I love seeing what everyone does. Like it's so cool. And like I think, if you're ever like hesitant about like, oh, should I do art? I'm not good enough yet. Just do it, because even the act of like doing something, you learn from that and then you can do another one and you just keep going. That's what I loved about seeing all the different styles. People were at different levels, but it was all amazing and so good. And yeah, it was rad. But yeah, thanks for showing it to me.
You're welcome. And what I also like there is people really trying out different programs. I know like for professional industry, you have to be comfortable with Adobe programs often. But
yeah, that's a whole other conversation.
even we try to make it possible for the ones that like had other programs or other apps for graphic to be able to like save them somehow and have someone else animate them. And we even had one admin animated her part in PowerPoint.
That's amazing.
PowerPoint?
Yes.
That's really, really cool. That's fascinating. And also like that pushes the medium forward when you think about it, right? Like how cool that is. And as long as you can capture that, that can become something too. So sorry, Adobe, like there's other things out in the world, and like young ARMY now are going to be pushing you guys forward. Like I have a lot to say about how I feel like a company that monopolizes the tools that get you a job are creating like invisible barriers for creators of color. And I am not cool with that. I think that's whack. But there are free programs. You can use those, do your thing, because that thing can become its own thing that people can then hire you for. Like maybe you're the PowerPoint like animator. That's awesome. And like that's a cool thing. You get hired for that. That's awesome,
Yeah, I think especially like the basics in graphic design or animations, like that can be done everywhere or anywhere. You can even just take your phone and make a small stop motion video and there you go.
Yeah, emotion's really important. I love it. And I think it's, it's really important because I think as like jobs progress, so like I was always more gravitating towards like print design and that kind of stuff, but we live in a way more digital world, and the way that people consume art and look at art and the way music goes and stuff like that, like motion's a really important part. Even if you do just a little bit as you're like coming up in your career, it helps you understand other people. I don't enjoy coding, say that, right? But I love watching videos about it. I love watching like how people do stuff. So then when I worked with the animator, I was able to be like, okay, I can make you these, assets in a certain way because I know how they need to be for you. I have this idea. Could you do it like that? And he'd be like, oh, I can't do that. But what if I do this? And I was like, oh, that's a way better idea. Do that.
That's actually true.
even if you look at other things, like things might come up and you need some, I don't know, UX design, for example. And if you have a little bit of knowledge, like you don't have to know everything or go into really deep details of how all those effects are named. But as long as you communicate with other people on what you like, what ideas you have, that's already helping a lot. And especially, like you said, with having the layers split up so they can be animated. Did you work in Photoshop or did you work in Illustrator or in another program?
So if you looked at my Illustrator files for the 70s remix, you would scream. They're so not pretty. Like, I'm usually the person that like mechanicalizes. I'm very like, buy the books, make it look beautiful. And it was such a like super fast turnaround that file itself is not very beautiful. But I made all the typography in Illustrator because I wanted him to be able to kind of like made an Illustrator, put it into Photoshop, so it was a smart object. So that's how I did the typography. And then like the drawings were all done on my iPad. I use Procreate. I'm trying to actually learn more Clip Studio. I still use Photoshop all the time. But yeah, as far as the design goes, I used to have a tablet. This is like technical talk. I used to have a Wacom tablet and I always felt a disconnect. And that was like, my fan art period of like, being 14. And I didn't like it. And I saved up for like the longest time to try and buy a Cintiq. So I got like the little like 12WX Cintiq. And that was cool. And I definitely liked it more, but it just didn't quite get there for me. And then when the iPad came out, I bought that and it was like day and night. It was just way more intuitive. That was a tool that really, really worked for me. So I actually use my iPad all the time. Like I will use it to do sketches before I even work on album art. A lot of times I just make sketches. Whether or not I show them to the client depends, but on my iPad I can then just like transfer them over to my computer really fast. And
I want to ask, we're trying to figure out what kind of device to actually change in our office. So we wanted to know if it's much better to have like a Windows kind of something like that, or is it much better if we get an Apple device?
I have a very diplomatic answer for you, because I've gone both ways. I think that like cult of Mac is like the thing. Like when you're a graphic designer, you're not working on a Mac, you're not a graphic designer, and that's BS. We're to the point where like it's kind of interchangeable. It's like, what do you prefer? What works for you? But I think it depends, right? So like people who work in like animation that really need to crunch things, they're using
Another siren.
they're using the PC, right? Because they really need to be able to add to it and do that kind of stuff. I found that I just like Apple in general because I've been indoctrinated. So like that's like my default. But when I was working with Lucasfilm, the files that I had to handle were such huge key art files that like my laptop could not handle it. So I actually like invested in like a PC. My friend built it for me so that I actually could like add to the RAM and really like crunch and save and do what I needed to do. And like now I think that like my MacBook Pro is like 10 times that crunching power. But it's actually been kind of interesting because you would think, okay, you're a print designer to begin with, those files have to be huge. So you need like really crazy, powerful things. But actually, it's kind of like the digital files now have to be absolutely ginormous because you have to keep everything layered for the people who work on it after you to like animate or do whatever they want. Also, you have like 4K, all these like specifications that are dictated by like like Spotify or Apple or whatever. It's actually, the files are way, way bigger and they can be used across a lot more things. You never know what you're going to make if they need to make a billboard out of it or whatever. So I actually work way bigger, way more layered. I do a lot of like Photoshop documents that are large document file sizes and I have to resize them small. It's a whole thing. A technical question. So for me, if I'm going to use a Mac, then it has to be like, maxed out because I need the crunching power for the files that I'm making. So if you don't need to crunch stuff, then, maybe you don't need that. And it's just like your preference. But like, I'm sure like, Natalie might have other opinions too, because like when you're animating or making those kind of motion files, like you really need like power. So it just depends what you actually need it for,
My biggest consideration actually for like the people we hire is that some of them don't want to work on Apple products. Like I also have to consider the comfort of the people who are actually going to use the
Yeah,
device.
it's valid.
I have a graphic artist that she is okay with the Windows kind of device. And then when we told them that we are planning to change everything into a Mac, she's like, but I'm not comfortable there. So like I have to think about those things.
Yeah.
I had always Windows,
Mm-hmm.
and in my second agency where I worked, I had to switch to Mac. And I have to say, now I work at Windows again. And I think the only thing, because the Mac was really good at the agency, the only thing that really changed was like the shortcuts working in the programs. And like there are things that are better, that I like more on Windows, because I can just,
Yeah, totally.
my graphic card burned and I just changed it myself, and I can stack up stuff, whatever I need. And I can also change my monitors. So like if you look into a good monitor, which has, I have that now since 6 years, I think, and someone recommended it to me. In the end, I think I sometimes work on a MacBook Pro when I'm like moving around or I'm not really at home, but I miss the fast PC or
Yeah.
having like
Yeah.
2 documents open, because I sometimes push stuff from Illustrator to After Effects and back and forth. I think like if someone says like Mac just because like everyone else works with Mac and you don't have the budget for a Mac, seriously, there are so many good options out there. They're a lot cheaper.
I agree. I think it's interchangeable enough now. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I will think about these things.
so, so we couldn't
Yeah.
give you a solution.
It's not a good solution. You would be okay if you went PC, and you'd be, super cool if you went on that. Either way, it's totally okay. You just have to like think about what you actually need it for. My comfort level right now is Mac, but like I could totally do the same thing on PC at this point.
Well, we'll think about it. Okay. Going back to the interview. Going back to when you were working with BTS, you already shared like the joys of it.
Yeah.
What were the challenges that you encountered when you were working with them? I mean, were you communicating online also, or like,
Yeah.
did you communicate with the artist directly, or there's somebody else?
No, not directly. No. Yeah, there's like, layers of teams and stuff like that. So, other artists I work with that are maybe like going towards that level, like it's kind of the same thing, because you figure like they don't not have time to worry about. You have to like, keep that in perspective. So I'm sure that they're shown like, certain process things, I think. But like when I get feedback, a lot of times it's not just like them, it's other people too. I'll be given an assignment, I will try to understand the assignment, and then I will either make a mood board or make for them. We did like a sort of like a mock-up, like, here's 30 seconds of like what it could be to get feedback. So, it's kind of like I have project managers who work with people at this label, and then they work with people who are bilingual that then work with other people. So there's like a lot of like layers to a project like that, which is the challenge. When I worked more indie, or sometimes when I work with smaller artists, sometimes it's just like the artist and their manager and like the person at the label is just there to like be there if you need them, and it's way more direct. That has its own challenges, right? Sometimes the artist will be at like 3 a.m. Oh, I think I want it to be red now. You know what I mean? It's not them, but you know what I'm saying? Like that's its own challenge, right? That you have to like, be professional and be like, oh, okay. But when you're working on like a larger kind of artist, you have so many other people that you have to work with, that you have to communicate with. I've worked on other artists too, where like people who are bilingual, you really have to like, lean on them, because I'm not very good with language. Although I did start taking Korean classes, because I was like, I want to be able to be better with, typography and all that. But the challenges, I think, on that specific thing were actually just the time. We just didn't have a whole lot of time. I felt the same way with that team that I did with Lucasfilm, which was that like, they knew what they wanted. They gave really good feedback. and they were like, but we want you to do your thing, which was kind of like, whoa, you want me to do my thing? All right, but
Are
let
you
me do
sure?
things for you. Yeah, but I think that comes from a place of like really understanding yourself and your own brand, and like knowing, like, you know, like if you know what you want. And I understand that more now, like when I'm putting a photo shoot together for like an artist. As an art director, like half my job is chemistry, and if I know, you know, how to put this together to begin with, then everyone kind of like does their own thing, and I don't need to be, you know, so on them. Like I give them my trust. So I think that that's really sort of like cool, and, you know, I guess like a lucky thing. But yeah, time is always a challenge. You know, when some people are in California and your client is, you know, in Korea and you're in New York, you know, I've worked recently with an artist in the UK. So like that was like, you know, another time difference. I've worked with artists who are like in Japan, and like I actually did something once for someone as a freelance assignment, and I basically just turned my whole time clock around for a week because like I couldn't handle. So actually like, I was like working the graveyard shift New York style. Yeah, I guess that's it. They actually were not that, I guess, challenging in any very difficult sense of the word. You know, it's just managing your own time.
Oh, it's just time. So they're easy to work with. Sort of easy to work with.
Yeah, I would say the team at Columbia that I worked with, and then like the team from at the time that would be Big Hit that they worked with, I'll just, you know, it was like great feedback. There was no difficulty. I think, you know, in music, a lot of the difficulties, a lot of it is like, you know, time stuff. Like, you know, we don't have a lot of time to get this done. Like, what is possible? Or things that are kind of like out of your control. Like, oh, we're gonna change this and do that. Sometimes like you have to work with like people who have very different tastes or have, you know, strong opinions, and like being able to help them find what they want can be a challenge. But I don't think any of those difficulties are things you can't overcome. I think as a designer, whatever you are, if you're a designer, art director, creative director, whatever, like communication is one of the most important parts of your job. And like, you know, asking those questions to get those answers, that's on you.
Okay, you mentioned that, you know, it's all about, part of your work is like ensuring that the entire team working on a project is, you know, they have chemistry, right? So you get to pick the people that you work with on every project. I mean, aside from if when you're assigned for it.
Yeah. Sometimes people come in and they have a team, you know what I mean? So like sometimes bands already have a creative director, and the creative director just like wants our help to do a few items or like suggest people to them. Sometimes, you know, sometimes bands are like, my cousin made this art, and then like I have to fix it up, you know, like, oh, it's not technically right, but I can work with this, I can help them. Sometimes, you know, yeah, you're the one completely working with them. It's very different every time. It's different across every label.
Oh, okay. So when you're the one picking your team members,
yeah, sometimes I do.
What are the qualifications that you look at, or the attitudes, or maybe you look at a specific profile or something like that? What do you look at?
So especially if I'm putting like a photo shoot together, or if I'm like commissioning an artist, another designer, the very first thing, of course, is the portfolio and the style of work. And usually we've had a conversation, you know, management, label, musician, like what's the style that we're looking for? And so we'll come up with a few different options of people, like, is this the kind of vibe, style, portfolio? When I'm putting together a photo shoot, sometimes it depends on what the main angle is that we're trying to do. Like I don't always follow the same formula. Like for instance, like I had a recent photo shoot for an artist, and like the important thing was the makeup. So I actually started with the makeup artist and kind of like built this team around the makeup artist, because that was the most important thing to this person. In the past, sometimes it would be like, oh, I really want to work with this photographer. And knowing that, I would talk to the photographer and be like, who is your ideal team? Who does your lighting? Like, who do you want on this? Because I want to set this photographer up to win. So, you know, it'll be like, you know, let's have you bring what makes you comfortable so we can get what I'm seeing in your portfolio. And so it's asking them like, what's your process? Was this film? Was it digital? Things like that. Sometimes there's certain projects where it's like, okay, I'm doing the creative from scratch, so I really want to like build this team around people either I've worked with or I've wanted to work with. And if I haven't worked with someone yet, I try to talk to them first to see what they're like. Everyone's a human, right? And not every musician is super comfortable in front of a camera, believe it or not. Some musicians like don't enjoy that process. So I want to find someone who makes them confident and comfortable and, that they can feel safe with. Some musicians are like, I want like really glossy, cool, so I try to find someone that can like make all that happen for them. So I try to keep in mind sort of like a trifecta of like, number one, the style and the portfolio and the consistency of that. Number two, their personality. Will they get along as humans? Because I think that like people who vibe together will create art that they didn't even know they were capable of. And third, it's like asking people like, what can I do to help you succeed? Like, what are things that I don't know that you could tell me? Like, oh, I really need this kind of lighting, or oh, I need this kind of studio, or I want to work with this kind of producer to like, make this happen.
I also hire people, and it's kind of really hard to put a team together. I mean, sometimes they have the competency, the technical know-how, but they don't jive with the personality. So it's kind of a challenge sometimes.
I think so too. Yeah, especially in art too, because like everyone is doing a really cool job. And from my perspective, it's like we're all in this together. But sometimes people are like protective, and I understand that. It's like, like the thing I do is the coolest thing. But sometimes you have to find people who are okay with being together. Sometimes there's people who are like, okay, they do their own thing and like they're the star of their show. Maybe that personality won't get along with these other people. So we have to kind of like balance it and see, what we can do, ultimately make a bunch of art.
Yeah, especially when you said like when stuff comes up or something happens on short notice and the things are not possible like in the way the client, for example, like imagines, you need to have a team that is like flexible and like also, like you said, come up with other ideas that are maybe similar, and not just like say, can't do this,
not gonna do it.
right.
Yeah, you need to find some like people who can like solve the problem on the go, or maybe have some other knowledge that can jump into it.
Oh, totally. And like a lot of my team building stuff is a little more like temporal maybe, because it's like, we all get together. It's kind of like a little snow globe, right? Like we all get together for this like, photo shoot. It's this like little moment in time. We create some content and, then the team kind of disassembles and it moves on. I always try to be very cognizant of the fact of like whoever I work with, from my perspective, right? Like I love that it's something different every day. I do something and I move on to the next thing. And that's such a challenge and cool. But their perspective is different, right? Like this is their music, this is their life. And this thing that I'm helping give a little bit of context to, live with that forever. I mean, I guess I do too, but like it feels a little different. And so like there's a gravity to like the privilege and the responsibility to that you have to like also think about too, is that like I'm gonna try and do another project, but like this is their album for a year, or some bands don't record stuff for like 5 years. Your spoilers, Army. One of my indie bands came back after like 7 years, and I was like, oh my god. But yeah, it's like it's a consideration for sure, and like you want them to have a good memory and an impression. And like sometimes things don't always go right. Once there was an artist who like missed the photo shoot because of a personal circumstance, and then I think that artist got dropped by a label. Nothing ever happened, and like I at the time was like, oh my gosh. But sometimes things are cosmically out of your hands. So you just have to like do the best with what you have and communicate as best that you can.
Yeah, definitely, because you can't control things, many things. You just have to adapt.
Especially like right now,
everything's so uncertain right now. I have people come in, like we have schedules set already. And then the middle of it, like a few days before, somebody, informs us like, oh, I have to attend on a medical thing. Things have to adjust constantly, and you have to be able to be flexible enough to adapt. And just like Annie said earlier, just focus on the solutions rather than the challenges that you're gonna face. Because, well, that's life.
Yeah, that's life. I mean, there's gonna be problems that you have to solve. Like, I mean, if you want to talk about like the 70s mix, right? Like, I remember being like, okay, they want a filter, but I don't want the filter to be like a filter. And
Mhm.
having these sort of conversations with like Crystal the animator, being like, okay, what if it's like this kind of thing that makes it feel retro or whatever. At first I was like, I don't even know if there should be a filter, but then like, no, that the client wants that. So okay, they're seeing something that I'm not seeing right now. Someone else comes in like, what about this? Being open, being able to be like, oh yeah, okay, that is a really cool idea. Giving him kudos, that was a great idea. Like, yeah, that was a way to problem solve. And like being able to put your thoughts aside sometimes and like be open is really important. And we live in this sort of time when things are kind of uncertain sometimes.
Mhm.
So I think it behooves us all to be a little more open, ask other people like, okay, how are you feeling? Like, check in with people,
Yeah.
and it'll bring your art to a way better place, I think.
Can we go back a little bit and walk us through the entire day of Annie Stoll?
Well, wake up at 4 a.m. because my cat wants cat food
Oh my gosh,
So
at a weird
4
early.
a.m.
hour. And then I go back to sleep and then go back to sleep. And then wake up again because she's still hungry. We're working on it. Um, so yeah, that's usually like the first thing. Maybe shower. It depends on like if there's meetings or whatnot. I usually get started around like 9 or 10, and there's emails, there's requests. Every day is kind of different. I am not consistently working till way later than I should is the answer. But every day has its own challenges and its own things depending on what you're working on.
Mhm.
Throughout the day, like sometimes you will be given like little, almost, it's kind of like a mini game, like mini assignment, quick, we need, the homepage takeover for, this song that's happening on Spotify. And then you'll have longer term projects where it'll be like, okay, like I'm budgeting my time because, I have a deadline in 2 weeks from now to show logos and to kind of do that. And, there'll be like meetings that pop up like, hey, can we talk to go over this idea? Or, hey, can you fix these things? I do like to try to take a lunch and maybe take a little bit of a walk and get away from it a bit. I think one of the challenges of, when your work is in the place that you live, then sometimes you don't unplug, and that's bad. And I
Yeah,
should be better about that.
that's my problem.
um, yeah, no, for sure. It's definitely a challenge. Before the pandemic, I would have days where I'd have to like go out and travel to go do the photo shoots or like client work. Here, sometimes it's like, okay, I gotta like get up and go on at a different time because I'm remotely there. It's not a very interesting answer to your question, but
It's okay.
eating food, staying hydrated, doing your work,
Listening to
you know,
BTS in your schedule also.
getting way too many Weverse notifications. Like, oh my god,
Yeah.
he's answering. Oh. Sometimes I'm like, oh no, what client's blowing up my phone?
Like for us, it's always like whenever they are going live,
Yep.
I can assure you we have an admin meeting in GVFX ARMY. Exactly at that time, we had to cancel so many small meetings like inside our fan base because it was like, oh my god, Jimin
Yeah,
got live.
that
Okay,
happened to us too.
we chat later.
That's
Bye.
true.
I made like a meeting once when I was trying to get tickets, and I was like, important meeting, blocked my calendar for an hour. I was like, I was doing my work, but I also was in ticket line. Like, don't come to my office, I'm busy. Important business.
I forgot my trail of thought. Now I just keep on thinking, did I miss a live? Your entire day starts around 9, and then you don't. It really depends on the workload and whatever it is
Yeah.
you need. Because I understand that in your line of work, you are given a specific period of time to accomplish like
Yeah.
bunch of work.
Yeah.
Right? It's not like every day you have something new to do every day. It's like they give you what you need to accomplish within a certain period of time.
Sort of, and then it changes. But yes, in theory, no, in practice, it's very different. And because I am now in a very smaller team, there's not as many people to spread the work as there was when I like worked across all the labels. So that's a little different. Theoretically, yeah, it should be like 10 to 6. But like sometimes I work with people who are on the West Coast, so 6 o'clock for me, for them, is like 3 o'clock. And
Oh, the time again, yeah.
right, exactly. But yeah, so sometimes that has to be, adapted. And I don't work the kind of job that like gets overtime as well. So like sometimes boundaries have to be set. I can't do this, I can do this. And it just goes back to like, communication and that kind of thing.
For sure. So in your line of work, we wanted to know, what is it that you consider your greatest achievement so far? Okay, let's start with your personal achievement.
Oh, that's such a hard question to answer. I don't know if I've done it yet. I don't know that you ever can do it. I think that like I said earlier, that like if you've made fans happy, then that is the greatest achievement. Like if you've done something, or if I've done something that like made someone just like a little bit happier, because like it's entertainment, it's music, you know what I mean. I'm not a cool brain surgeon. Like there's value in art for sure, so I'm not diminishing that. But I think for me, like if there's ever a moment that it's just like helpful to somebody, that art like inspires you a little bit, then that's the greatest accomplishment. It doesn't matter like who the band was, or like how big or how little. It's, to me, it's like, did I do a good job? Did that resonate with someone? Is my client happy? Like that's an accomplishment. And like I think people now want me to say, well, I won a Grammy, but like it's a wild thing that happened to me, but that's not trophies and all these wild accomplishments. Like they don't define who you are as a human. Like the best things that you can do is be good to other people, right? So you don't have to win anything in your life. If you are good to the people around you, that's the greatest accomplishment. So I want to work on being better and like doing good work and learning more, and someday maybe I will feel like I can tell you I have an accomplishment.
We will schedule that interview again.
Yes, please.
Okay, what about industry-wide goals? What would you consider to be like the greatest? Oh, if you're working in the industry, what would be the greatest achievement for somebody in the industry?
Okay, so that's a very good question, because I think that like there are very like superficial benchmarks that we put a lot of stock into. And I think even like within the fandom being like, we want them to win that thing, and I want them to win that thing. But like I think that, my personal opinion, like as an industry, American industry, I'll say that because that's where I work. But there's so much more work to be done, especially with them catching up to the fact that like there's a whole other world out there of amazing music, amazing artists that don't necessarily sing in English. And I want to see the industry stop being so xenophobic and ridiculous. There's no excuse for it. So I want to see more people being given opportunities. I think it's so frustrating that like we're not there yet, and there's no excuse for it. This is a little bit of like a negative opinion, but like I want to see things be better for other artists, for other musicians, and I want to see people like embrace other cultures and languages, not treat it like it's something like, I don't know, like exotic.
Definitely.
Like, dude, just listen to some good music, get into it. And I would love to see like these artists be more elevated and loved, and I want more people to listen to good music.
Yeah.
That's what I want.
Okay. What do you think would be the greatest setbacks, or something like, for example, you made something based on your understanding of the project specifications, right, or the requirements, and then it ends up like the artist not liking it, and then they give you a suggestion. They give you a suggestion and you don't agree with the suggestion. Like, did you ever encounter something like that?
Yeah, very often. Listen, this is my perspective. You decide your own portfolio, right? So if the client is happy with something, there's a balance that you have to do to like make them happy, because ultimately for a musician, they know their music and they know their audience more than you ever will. And sometimes they do stuff or they request things that you're like, that's a bad idea. It's not going to look good visually.
Cringe.
Right. One of my tricks, though, is that I will do what they ask, and then I will do an example of like something like that, but a little similar, and trying to like make it quote unquote better. Like, so maybe if they're just like, oh, I want a yellow letter right here, and I'm like, it's gonna be really hard to read. I'll do it, and then like I'll do another one to say, hey, what if we just shift this yellow a little bit? Now you can read this more, and let them visually see it, because sometimes people have ideas in their mind but they haven't seen it on the screen. So rather than being like upset and being like, this is not beautiful and not my style and like whatever, personally I always try to like give a couple of options and find it. And hey, if they end up picking the thing that you don't like, you do your best. And if you don't want to put it in your portfolio, no one's making you do that, you know what I mean? But if they're happy, ultimately, like, I'm working for them, right? So if you're a fine artist, you're your own boss, so you decide what you want to do. But part of growing as a human is also kind of like learning those graces, and I don't think I was necessarily taught that. So that's definitely a personal thing. A different designer might tell you like, no, I tell them I won't do it, and I can respect that, but it's not my personality. Sometimes you work really, really hard on something and like you pour your whole heart and soul into a certain project you can never tell anyone about. That would have been the coolest thing ever, and quarantine hits and you'll never be able to tell anybody about this amazing, cool, awesome
That sounds
thing.
Very
awful.
sad.
That sounds awful.
And it happens, and you're under NDA
Oh
forever,
no.
and the thing was really cool, and
Those are the very unfortunate things.
It sounds horrible.
it happens, and man, be sad for a week, listen to a certain song that you love on repeat, eat some food, and then you'll have other opportunities because people will remember that thing that you did, and even if it wasn't used, maybe it'll come back around. You never know. To talk about like some of the Star Wars stuff, like I did a bunch of those, like design for merch gigs, and I did a whole bunch of them, and then at a certain point I got busy, couldn't do any other ones, and whatever, so I didn't have that. I was already working at other places, blah blah blah. But that director remembered that I used to draw in the margins and doodle, and I'd like do little like extra artsy pieces. And when Star Wars Rebels came out, there was a children's book that was coming out for Sabine, who is this like artist and like Mandalorian, and like she like uses her art to express cool things. And he had remembered that part of me and was like, your stuff reminds me of this character. And he pitched me to a book company to do the illustrations for the Star Wars character, which was like the coolest, nerdiest, like whatever thing. And like, this was like a year or two later that this happened, right? He remembered that. And so there was a lot of designs and stuff I did that didn't get published, but that led me to that. And then because I did that little book, 2 years after that, there was like a Women of the Galaxy book, and they wanted like women who had drawn Star Wars characters or people whose art styles they wanted to do it. And they asked me to be in this book, and I got to draw Sabine. And
So
it was
cool.
so cool. And I couldn't believe that people even remembered that. And I had a blast, so like you never know, like, what will lead to the other thing, and people remember stuff.
There really is no experience that, there's always something to gain out of every experience.
Yeah, even the bad ones. Yeah.
Speaking of gain, what have you gained working in the field you're at? So you've been in the industry for how many years?
A lot. I guess a lot. I've worked like my grown-up fancy job for like 7 years now. And then before that I was doing like sort of like freelance kind of things after college.
So what have you gained so far?
I think that the more that I progress. I've learned a lot about myself. I've learned a lot about art. I've learned a lot about design, and I think that my style has evolved, which is good. I've learned so many more techniques, and also to be open to try new things, to not get stuck in one way, and just be able to, be more open. And I also feel like I've been able to collaborate with more people, because as an art director, as a designer, you're making stuff. As an art director, you can make stuff, but you also need to expand out and let other people fly. So I think I've learned more about teamwork and all that kind of stuff. And I hope I just keep growing. I think that's the lesson too, is that the more you know, the more you don't know.
Yes.
So keep knowing.
Okay, what about losses? What have you lost working in the field you're at?
That's a very good question. So I think we talked about this a little bit earlier. When you're a little more freelance or working for more independent artists, you have a lot more freedom, but you don't have as big budgets. So you can get really creative. You don't have a lot. You have to think of more things. And you have a more direct connection to the artists themselves or their management. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes that's a bad thing. Now that I've gone on to work for a more corporate site, it's okay, cool, I have health insurance now, that's important. But also sometimes you can't be as creative. Sometimes you have to deal with people who are not the easiest to deal with. Sometimes corporate things happen. And one of the biggest challenges of working as an artist, when your job is to be creative consistently day in and day out, how do you recharge and still stay creative without burning out? And it's okay to say that you burn out and take some time and then that kind of thing too. So those are probably the big overarching sort of challenges. And also making sure as an artist that you're staying healthy, sitting up straight, because it's a long game. And I feel like when I was younger, there was this super pressure, be up all night, be hungry, just don't ever sleep, and don't do that. You want to be able to draw when you're 40 and beyond. There's a lot of life beyond, I am told, so don't worry. And you're never too old to start too. If people are listening to this and they're older and I'm too old to do this, no way, do it. Life's too short. Just do that kind of stuff. So anything that you would lose, I think, is gained in another way that you just don't know yet. Maybe you have a not so great experience in your internship, but it'll teach you what you don't want to do or who you never want to be. Maybe a project goes completely south because of the pandemic, but something else happens later. Any kind of loss, I think that you can turn around to the positive, and anything that's positive that happens, you can keep cultivating that and learning from it. Just don't stay still in one place.
I love it. I love you're able to maneuver everything and see beauty in things, and it shows in your art.
Yeah, we try. We all have bad days, believe me. It's totally okay to, sometimes as an artist you just get in a funk and you're just I suck, everything sucks, I can't do this, and talk to your friends, you know what I mean, listen to some good music. You'll get there. It's okay to be open about that stuff. I think that there's a lot of times, especially in design, it's just people will be put on a pillar and it'll be oh, this person is so amazing, they never had a bad day, they're awesome, Helvetica is their weapon. And it's just come on, man, we're all humans. At the end of the day, we're just trying to make art and make things better. So
I think especially in the social media, with all the social media and gaining, I don't know, one post will get you, or one design will get you a lot of likes or a lot of interactions, and the other one not. But I think especially when you're starting out with design and you try to come up with the courage to send out your design, and you notice oh, it doesn't get so much likes, then this or that design, that's not of course it's not a good feeling, but that should really not what you look out for. You should have fun while doing this piece of work, and not so much focus on, even if it's always easier said than done, but not so much focus on the reaction that we'll get. Truly.
No, I really hear that. I mean, the number next to your name is not your self-worth. You are worthwhile no matter what. If you have a bazillion followers or no followers, you're human, you're awesome. You know what I mean? Like, and it doesn't mean that you're a good or a bad art like that. Sometimes people, the algorithm is whack. Like
Yeah.
sometimes it just happens and that's it. Sometimes people resonate. Like there's a whole discussion, and like I think it gets very confusing as an artist because it's a piece of yourself to make art, and so you get kind of wrapped up in things. Like it's easier, you can't be as objective because it's like this piece of art, which is sort of a piece of myself, didn't go far, so people don't like it, so they don't like me, and that's not
Yeah.
it. It's the world is whack, the algorithm is whack. Making art that makes you fulfilled, that's what makes you fulfilled. You could win the biggest music award ever, and that means nothing if you don't have real friends who know the real you. You know, you could accomplish all these things, but that means nothing if you aren't good to other people, right?
Yeah.
So it's tricky because as a professional, like you sort of do sometimes need social media. Like social media will get you seen, it will get you jobs, but how do you keep the job? Do you know what I mean? And so interacting with people, like even those base levels where we're talking about, like, you know, the people that you came up with or people that you meet, like, you know, a genuine connection is more important than a tweet going viral. Because like a tweet goes viral, people just steal your art and pretend to be you, and like, you know, like whatever it like all these things can leave you feeling very, very empty. And like we could have a whole conversation about all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think navigating a healthy relationship as an artist between who you are as a person, your fandoms, yourself, your portfolio, like, and that's a conversation you have to be very real about yourself with too. I mean, like, your Stan account should not be like your portfolio account, but I only have like, you know, my thing, and it's just kind of like, for me, I'm like, okay, this is who I am. Like, my social media is my social media. Sometimes I post stuff that I do, but I'm not in the position where I'm trying to get gigs. I think a lot of designers have a Twitter that's like, or Instagram really, that's like a portfolio, and then they have their like other one that's like, here's my cat, here's what I ate. And so people combine it, and that's valid, but I think you have to make that decision for yourself. It's not always easy, but I think you have to don't be so hard on yourself about like numbers and stuff. And I've met people and had arguments with people about if you should pay people based on their numbers, and I don't think you should. Everyone should be paid fairly, equally, more than fairly. If you are trying to rely on artists for their numbers, then your brand isn't good. Like you're not. You can't use other people for their stuff. But you know, like at the same time, like we want bands to reach as many people as possible because that's how their art is consumed and that's how things roll. And like, you know, when you're a fine artist, even like a fan artist, that you're like, people are buying your stuff because like they see it. It's a difficult conversation to have sometimes. But I think ultimately, like, to me, it's like your mental health is more important than all this other stuff.
Yeah.
So if you find that like it's being difficult for you, if you find that it's making you negative and things like that, I think there are other ways to get a job and stay healthy. It's my advice.
Which makes me wonder if there is anything in the past that you kind of regret or would want to do over in terms of your career.
That's a really good question. If you had asked me this like even like a little while ago, I would have given you very specific answers, all kind of stuff. But I would say, and this was very hard for me when I was like 20 to think about, right? Because I'd be like, oh, I didn't win this thing, or oh, I missed this thing, and like now my life is over. But now that I'm like not 20 anymore and I'm like past 25, I'm like, you know what? When things were really rough there, I was actually learning a lot, which got me to this new place. Even things that didn't go the best, I can't regret, because I wouldn't be where I am if that didn't happen. And I wouldn't have compassion for people if I hadn't had these things happen. And I don't wish for bad things to happen to anybody, but I'm not going to regret my own stuff, because everything kind of like moves you to where you are right now. And like sometimes I kind of like go in my head where I'm just, you walk down a street and like a leaf blows in front of you and you're like, every single moment in my life led up to me and this leaf just going by.
I love it.
You know what I mean? And sometimes that reverses when you have a really bad day, right? You're like, everything in my life led to this terrible thing that happened today and I'm cranky. But then you're like, guess what though? Today's crankiness is going to lead up to something really cool happening tomorrow. So you can't worry too hard about it. I think you just have to do the best where you are, do as much good as you can right now, and like learn from things. Like if something doesn't go right, or even if you mess up, like learn from it, do better.
Why do I feel like I'm talking to RM right now?
No, I can't.
Because I keep going outside. I got a bike. It's the bike. Yeah. But I resonate with that. I think that's a big deal. Yeah.
I mean, you are an army. Definitely. I can feel it and I can hear it. And it's just so genuine because the entire conversation, you've been very consistent with your, your values and your principles and how you look at everything. It doesn't just reflect on how you speak with us right now, but also how you explain how you deal with the people in your team and how you even make your art, how you create your art. So it's just, I'm so thankful you're an army.
Oh my God, I'm thankful you guys are too. Like, you're doing really important things that are connecting people. That's incredible, like for sure. Big group hug again.
So for final words, we're actually about to end the interview. But for final words, we will be asking for recommendations. Okay, what can you tell those who are planning to pursue a career in the field you're at right now? Those who are just, getting into the university or maybe graduating and about to enter the workforce.
Yeah, of course. So, and he's like, top 5 advice. Number 1, I'm going to do it. Number 1, no question is a bad question. You reach out to anyone and everyone, be professional, be kind, be cool, but like, reach out to people. If you see someone doing something cool and you're like, I want to be a music designer, or like, I want, like, who made this cool flyer? Like, how did that happen? Ask questions, reach out to people, because you know what? Like, people will tell you their journeys and that will help you learn about how you could apply it to yourself. You're on your own path, but it's great to talk to other designers and just like ask questions. And you know what? Like, what's the worst someone's going to say to you? No? Cool. Ask somebody else. Like, ask people. Don't be afraid to communicate, because you'll learn a lot about yourself as well. Number 2, always sign the contract. Always have a contract.
Yes.
Even if it's your friends, make a little mini contract. Do that. I once was very naive and trusted somebody and they made a lot of money and I made nothing, and it could have probably paid off a bunch of my student loans. And that was a bad mistake. Learn from my mistake. Always have a contract, even if it's just like in name only. Just do it.
Yeah.
Put it in writing. And if you need help making a more professional one, there's a book called the Graphic Artist Guild Guide that has like, set examples. And there's also a lot of like really good information on Jessica Hish's website for like young students. So do that all the time. Number 3, like, we've talked a lot about art. We've talked a lot about like, be yourself, do your thing. You have to know the rules to break the rules. So by no means am I just like, go feral, do whatever. Bruh, you gotta learn it. Learn how to do the technical stuff, the uncool stuff, the unglamorous stuff. You know that, then you can do anything, and then you can fly. And precious, like, it's sometimes you meet people. I've hired people who have this incredible style, and then you open up the hood of the car and like, I can't even use the file. That's a huge problem. Maybe it wasn't their fault. Maybe they weren't taught. Try really hard to like, learn. And there's lots of resources online. And do number 1 again, don't be afraid to ask questions. Ask your professors, ask your friends. Number 4, you are awesome. You are amazing. Believe in yourself for real. Like, for real. There's going to be all kinds of jerks that tell you that your portfolio isn't good, or that, whatever. Don't listen to them. You are cool. You are very, very valid. However your style is, you can make that work for yourself. And number 5, don't be afraid to tell your story and to talk about your process. That is a way that you can by doing your process, by evolving, by trying new things, you'll find more about yourself and you will naturally evolve and do really cool things.
Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I love how you really narrowed everything down to very specific recommendations. I love it. Any words for those who are already pursuing the same career path as you are?
Yeah, I think being an art director, like, it's really important to remember that, like, you're a steward. It's not about you. You know, it's really important to truly listen to people and to be open to changing your perspective and your ideas. And really, as an art director, you have a privilege and a huge responsibility to create opportunities, especially for marginalized creators and for creators of color, because people who are like in these upper areas, like the art director is a lot of times the person that has access to the people who need to make these decisions. You can't always change things, but you can push, and you have to, whatever the result is. But the more you push, the better things will be. Don't put that onus on someone else. Like, you can do that yourself. And, you know, as an art director, like, don't be afraid to like hire people, like take chances a little bit, set people up for success. Like, you know, maybe someone needs a little bit more help, so you have to work a little harder to help them. Do that. It's totally worthwhile.
Wow. There are so many quotable quotes in this interview. What about those who are about to pursue another career, coming from the field where you're at? So those who are already in the field, like in the design field, the creative field, but they're planning to pursue something else outside of that.
Yeah. Well, like, as a designer, you have so many tools that you can apply to other things. One of my classmates was a designer for a while, but her passion was photography. And she's an incredible designer, like very, very talented. But she loves, like, she does photography for like families and babies and like weddings. And she is so talented. And she takes the part of design that she was very thoughtful. She loved people's stories. And that part of her personality is what makes her able to capture people in these very beautiful moments, like when a baby's being born or like when people are coming together. And she also, like, all of her branding is lit because like she's a great designer. You know, she knows what to look for. So even if you don't do one thing, you can always take skills that you have or things that you like and translate it to something else. And that's like very, you know, cool.
These are great advice. I should take them too.
Try.
Okay, last one. What is your advice for those who would want to work with BTS or their agency, their label?
Yeah. So don't be mad at me. I think the best advice that I can tell you is that don't make that your life goal, right? Like, if you embody the principles of what they're telling you, that is loving yourself, that is being there for, you know, your fellow humankind, that puts you on a path of self-fulfillment. One of my favorite books is The Alchemist, which I guess Suga likes. That book kind of came to me at a point in time that like it helped me make certain connections, and it's sort of like an allegory, right? And there's this whole thing in the book where it's like you're on your sort of like personal destiny, your personal legend, and you know, when you are on your way, the universe kind of conspires in your favor. And when you stop listening to your heart, those things that you want get more and more distant. But if you follow what you love and you're good to the people around you, like, good things kind of come to your way because you're trying to manifest that. And if you never get to work with them, that's okay, because you're doing the work that they've inspired you to do. And you might be the person, like some other people that you work with, you might help them in the way that people have helped, you know, like BTS, right? And what an honor and a joy and a privilege that would be.
Like paying it forward.
Paying it forward for sure. And like, I think that if you ever do get to work with a band, any band, whether it's like BTS or anyone that you really admire and that you love, then, you know, my advice then is to be yourself, to be professional, to be honest about, you know, what you love and, you know, all this things that you can bring to your client.
Yes.
Everyone's just humans at the end of the day, right? So like whoever it is, like we can make cool art and that can make someone super, super happy. And, you know, if you get to work with a really awesome band, like don't take it for granted, like do everything you can to do your research, right? And if it's a culture that you're not familiar with, find the people who you can bring in that can help you, that you can elevate, that, you know, you can connect, and, you know, just do your best.
I love it. I love everything about this interview.
I mean, I didn't set out with that goal, right? So I didn't know that would ever happen. I couldn't even believe that would ever happen, right? So, you know, it's just forever grateful.
Yeah, if you are not so focused on one goal, like it leads to maybe other like amazing things that you might have not thought about, like at that current point. And yeah,
Right.
Sometimes if you're too focused, you kind of miss out on other things.
Yeah. I don't want to sound like I'm saying like, oh my God, you can't and you won't. Like that's not true at all. Like the universe is infinite. Anything could happen. And that's why you should do your best where you are, because that could lead you someplace else. But I do think that like anytime in my life that I've been like, here's this very specific goal that I want to accomplish, and then it doesn't happen, and then it kind of like, you know, messes with you, versus saying to yourself, you know what, this very specific goal would be cool, but what's the realm of the goal, right? Like, you know, oh, I want to learn how to do silkscreen posters because I love silkscreen posters. Maybe I'll do fan art of a band that I love. Maybe that band sees that poster and then hires you. Oh, like I want to learn more about motion. And like me, I wanted to learn more motion in videos. I like worked on stuff with these other bands because I was like, oh, this would be so cool. That prepared me for when I was asked to do this thing that otherwise I would have never been asked to do. So just keep that sort of like open-minded. But like the stuff that I did before was so meaningful. Like if I had never worked with them, I would still be trying to make good art and I'd still be a fan, because like the message and awesomeness in the music, like and the connections you have with other ARMY, like that's what matters, you know. Yeah.
Okay. Natalie, do you have any other last questions?
no, still not.
Well, I'm so grateful for you guys having me.
Yeah, this is actually the end of the interview, but we can keep chatting if you don't want. You know, we would just like to thank you so much for giving us a piece of your busy time.
Oh my God, like literally anytime. Thank you so much for like letting me talk to you all. Like it was like such an honor. Like my God.
It's an honor for us to. You have really given so much knowledge and wisdom to armies who are going to listen to this podcast. It's supposed to be a podcast.
Oh, podcasts are awesome. That's amazing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you for listening to me talk for that long.
No problem. Yeah, we're here to listen to you.